Since its inception, a momentum for this initiative is building up. We have seen a surge in its support, and numbers are growing daily. We have seen more than 1,000 civil organizations, plenty of scientists, academics. They have joined the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and some of the major cities around the globe, some of them being Sydney, Bonn, Birmingham, Barcelona, and most recent one, just yesterday, Paris has also endorsed this treaty. Now the question is, why is it important to launch this campaign here in Ottawa? All of us know that Ottawa has declared a climate emergency, yet in order to accelerate a just transition away from fossil fuel, we do require further action from all of us. And Ottawa being Canada's capital must add its support alongside the Canadian cities of Toronto and Vancouver, which have already endorsed the treaty, alongside other 30 plus cities, and they are still growing. And through this treaty, the city of Ottawa may encourage multilateral transnational diplomacy around the common goal of ending fossil fuel production and renewing the ecological conditions which will support life on Earth. And a number of organizations here in Ottawa, such as Cafes, Ecology Ottawa, For Our Kids, Horizon Ottawa, Below 2C, 3050.org, to name a few, are behind this campaign and are members of the Ottawa Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty campaign. We have a petition up and running. We are behind this campaign, and so far more than 500 people have already signed this petition, and the call is resonating well with the residents. As I mentioned, Toronto City Council, they took a huge step in response to this climate emergency, and they endorsed this treaty. And I would like to mention here and thank Councillors Mike Layton and Shelley Carroll for submitting the motion, and all the councillors and the mayor who supported it. And I'm so pleased to inform everyone here that today Councillor Mike is here with us. Thank you so much for being here today. And we are happy to have you here with us on our treaties, on Ottawa's, this treaty's launch here in Ottawa. And thank you so much for being here with us, Councillor Mike. I want to understand like why and how Toronto City Councillor endorsed the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and why did they think that it's important, and what was sort of the process? And yeah, so briefly, like how did it start? What was the movement like? What was the process? Could you please sort of reflect on that?
Happy to. And first, just let me thank you for the invitation to come and join the group as they launch their efforts in Ottawa to bring the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to your city council. I think it's really seeing a lot of momentum in the movement, not only as other councils around the world adopt a similar motion, but because of recent reports from the IPCC. I think most of you probably share this outlook that we are facing the existential crisis of our time with climate change. I think about it this way. So the 7 generations principle from the Haudenosaunee, which I know doesn't quite translate into the traditional territories of Ottawa, but I'm sure that many of you are familiar with it. I got 2 little girls at home, and I've always tried to apply this notion of 7 generations backwards and forwards in our reflection and in our planning. And I don't know about you, but like my girls are 4 and 6. At this point, I can't even imagine that they'll have grandkids, that all have grandkids. I'm not sure they'll ever have grandkids. That's a pretty shitty place to sit, right? That we were that generation. Letting down all those other generations, knowing what we know, we will have let all those generations pass. I don't think it's sunk in for a lot of people. I'm looking out on the square here, see people living their lives like they don't have this hanging over their head, and I find it a challenge. Like I'm gonna be totally honest. I find it a challenge to feel, and there's a couple councillors on the call, they'll feel this, to field calls about the inconvenience of a new bike lane and with the weight of the climate on my shoulders. I was at a meeting last night and I wrote this word down. These folks called their neighborhood unlivable because of a bike lane pilot that we put in. That bikes are dangerous, that it's tragic we would put this in their neighborhood. But they're apparently all cyclists and care about the environment. This isn't an argument about bike lanes, but it's just to illustrate that there's an enormous crisis ahead of us. And unless we start taking drastic, real action that will change the way we live, we have no chance, absolutely no chance of addressing it. So things like the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty commitment shouldn't be such a contentious point. We know, the science tells us, and scientists tell us, we have to stop taking fossil fuels out of the ground and burning them. It tells us that. So it shouldn't be a contentious point. But you know, I look at Toronto, I look at Ottawa City Council. I pulled up because I didn't want to miss any councillors that I saw on the call, and I saw I think we have 3 or 2 and someone from the office of another, which is fantastic. You're starting at a great space. I will remark that you have as many city councillors as the city of Toronto in Ottawa, which like perhaps that is thanks to Ford, but that's a democratic deficit that we have. That means our city council is dominated by suburban interests, people dependent on cars, people with large properties and lots. And there's a tendency on our council, and it has been for many years, to talk a lot from the left of center, but to govern a lot from the right of center. And unfortunately, and if you pay attention to Toronto politics, it probably comes as no surprise, I'm not on the mayor's A team, right? Like we don't see eye to eye. I would like us to be far more aggressive in our approaches to climate change, to poverty reduction, to housing the city's homeless, and generally speaking, most things on the political spectrum that are contentious. I think there's places we see eye to eye, of course, but along the spectrum of issues that I think people are finding incredibly important, I think I like to challenge our mayor to do more faster. That isn't to say we don't work together. So I drafted the city's climate crisis motion and prior to C40 in Copenhagen, and this was a couple of years ago, because I saw an opportunity. But it's not like he came to me and said, Mike, can you help me draft this? I put my motion in first, and I put a very strong motion in and told him, if you would like to change my motion, you have to go through me and work with our community activists in order to improve it. You can't take anything away. And rather than him putting forward a motion that would be a watered down version. So we positioned it, we outmaneuvered him to bring him onto our motion. For that reason, and because I was involved with that, I've become I wouldn't say involved, but are in closer contact with some of our activist community. And one of them one day came to me and said, you know, Mike, there's this thing called the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I think because of my success with the emergency, the climate emergency motion, they thought that this would be something up my alley. And I told them, and one of them in particular is on the call, I'll single her out in a sec, but I told them, you know what, I'm not sure the appetite of council is there. Things like non-proliferation treaties, that kind of language tends to freeze city councilors, and in particular, freeze our city solicitor into to taking a more cautious approach. Municipal lawyers are incredibly risk averse in Toronto, as I'm sure it's shared in the city of Ottawa. So I was the one that was hesitant. Me, the person that very frequently puts forward motions that have no chance in the world of passing. Increases in property taxes, tolls on this, vehicle registration fees. I got no problem with that, but I wanted it to win. And so my advice, and it's Lynn Adamson, who's on the call from Climate Fast. She's probably better to give you an update about how it went down in Toronto. But my advice was like, look, you got to demonstrate to me that it's got some support now rather than later. And you know, I'm really glad she did, because she brought back some updates on people that I didn't suspect would be so immediately into supporting the motion. And she brought those back, and we put it on, I think, incredibly quickly, and ran it with a very limited campaign compared to what it takes to get most things through Toronto City Council. I would probably say that some things are done through hard work, and some things are done through just the stars are aligned in planning. I think we got a bit of both. We got incredibly good work by Lynn and her team, who drove the local grassroots efforts. Our stars were aligned with reports that were coming out nationally and internationally about what needed to be done about climate change, and we managed to peg it into a point in time where we would have success. So for that, I'd love to thank Lynn, and to thank the organizers that are going to try to pull off the same in Ottawa, and to those councillors that are going to be champions. And like, I know Sean and Catherine are on the call, or councillors McKenney and Menard, as well as I think it's Councillor Curry's assistant, it's great to see you all here. I wish I wasn't so hesitant because of the language at our first meeting. I honestly, like, again, I'm a councillor that doesn't mind losing votes. I just don't like losing ones that matter. And I was hesitant to bring it forward because I thought it needed more work. I trusted my instincts after Lynn came back to me, and I will be forever grateful for her. And since then, I think I've tried to involve her in many of the discussions that we have around environment, around our budgeting at the city, because certainly that level of activism really paid off in this. And I see a lot of faces on this call that I don't recognize from being in politics or city council. So I trust that those are your Lynn Adamsons of Ottawa. And so your energy that you bring to this is going to be so vitally important. So thank you all for being here. I think that's all I had to say. And I'll pass it back to Bispa.
Wow. Thank you so much, Councillor Mike. I really appreciate all the valuable insights and information that you have shared with us. And of course, I understand that you have some other commitments and you're short on time, but I wanted to ask the audience if they have any questions for you before you leave, if that's okay. Angela.
Happy to break the silence. So Mike, how did you communicate it? Like, what was the punchy language that got you to communicate through the difficulty of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which I agree is a bit heavy as language goes?
You know, oddly enough, it was quite simple. I think I'll be honest on this call, I think some people thought it was just crazy enough that they could vote for it because it was unlikely to happen. We negotiated and we also brought through an action, a potential, or at least a report on a legal action against the world's biggest emitters. This was a couple years ago. Then Jason Kenney took some shots at me during the provincial election out there, so I probably won't be doing that in the lead up to their next provincial election. We don't want to give Jason too much fodder. So I don't think there was anything particularly special about the language, just highlighting and continuing the to highlight the importance of our action on climate writ large. The latest report from the IPCC I said enough C's, should be enough for us to convince anyone that we need to stop now. Like, I don't expect the governments in Alberta to support the same motion. I appreciate that they might find it more of a challenge, but certainly as a signal to our federal government that municipalities in the rest of the country have an appetite for us ending our economic commitment and addiction to oil, and in fact moving us to a point where we can move past fossil fuels. I think that it's there. I think the language around non-proliferation, maybe it has a fine home here. So 30 years ago, I'll tell this quick story. 30 years ago, another councillor, Layton, in the city of Toronto, put forward a motion, a non-nuclear proliferation motion. This is the city of Toronto. Like what use did we have with a nuclear non-proliferation motion going to city council? It passed. It wasn't without ridicule from the far right, but again, it was about highlighting a point and bringing an issue forward to say the people locally, the government that is most has the strongest pulse of their community is of firm agreement that we need to. This is a line we must not cross, and I think that probably for the most part was the reason why. We did I think I did a notice of motion, Lynn. You might remember. My apologies. I think I did a notice of motion where in City of Toronto, it might work the same in Ottawa. Forgive me for my ignorance. It's our members' motion, and it's just brought up. Typically, they're passed relatively quickly, and so in the past, sometimes when I've brought motions that have contentious language, the David Suzuki Foundation ran this, I think it was a Blue Dot campaign where you became a Blue Dot community, and part of the ask was including including the environment and some of environmental rights into our human rights. And our city solicitor at first saw that and freaked out. And then a report back was requested, which I didn't want. I didn't see any value in it, but I wanted to score the point and get the win and pass the policy. So eventually the report came back and said no problem. And so I think with that, it kind of demonstrated that like we can use stronger language. Really our council, what they don't want to do is spend any money. So I know that that's always a harder sell. They don't want to spend any money, and they have difficulty slowing down traffic or getting people out of their cars, which of course, like I trust there's not much disagreement on this call that that's a fundamental part of fighting climate change, is shifting our electrification as well as more active transportation, at least to address the one component of climate change, our transportation sector. So we did it through a notice of motion, and if I remember correctly, and please Lynn chime in, like there wasn't much debate. It wasn't particularly contentious. I may be remembering this incorrectly though. Like there's been so much.
It didn't get flagged for debate. The way it was on council, somebody would have had to say, we need to talk about this one.
Oh right? Yeah, passed on consent. Sorry, I should have said that.
Yeah,
I forgot. Thanks.
That
Lynn.
Was important.
It passed on our consent agenda. Nobody even bothered to hold it. So either they wanted it to pass quietly because they saw that like it was taking a position, it wasn't spending money, but that also means it passed unanimously. So yay.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here today. I know you have a busy schedule, but we really appreciate your time and all the information that you have shared. It's definitely very inspiring, and the valuable insights and information that you have shared with the group and all of us. So yeah, thank you so much once again, and really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Sending all the love from Toronto to Ottawa. All the best. Good luck.
Thank you, and have a great day. All right. Moving forward, I would take this opportunity to invite our next guest speaker, Sebie Samuel. Sebie, she is an Ethiopian-Canadian geographer and climate justice campaigner, and she is the global cities campaign lead for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. She has been campaigning and supporting a global coalition to scale the number of cities supporting a global phase out of fossil fuels and adjust energy transition. She's a co-founder and organizer of Ethiopia's Open Streets movement, and also co-founder of the urban sustainability NGO Lem Kadema, where she campaigns for plastic-free Ethiopia. Sebie, she holds a degree in geography and anthropology from McGill and an MSc in environmental change and management from the University of Oxford. A very warm welcome to you, Sebie. Thank you so much for joining us today. And needless to say that all of us, including myself, are very excited to hear more on the campaign from you.
Thank you so much, Bisma, and thank you to everyone who organized this session today. And it's been inspiring also to hear from the momentum in Toronto, which is inspiring the campaign in Ottawa. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'll turn off my video for better connection. So I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen now? Is it full?
Yes, great.
Okay, perfect. So I'm sure a lot of you know already about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, as it's why you're all here today. We are a global campaign to phase out fossil fuels in an equitable way and propel a just energy transition. And we know that we need urgent and collective action to be able to address the climate emergency, and that the main cause of this emergency is fossil fuels, as coal and oil and gas are responsible for around 3/4 of all carbon emissions that have been released since the Industrial Revolution, and around 86% of all emissions in the past 10 years. So this is a slide from the World Economic Forum, which every year puts out a global risk report showing the biggest risks that are facing humanity. And at the top of this chart is a lack of action to address the climate emergency is the biggest threat we're facing as humanity, both in terms of likelihood and impact. And to respond to this, we need to have an international response and an international mechanism. This is from the most recent production gap report, which shows the discrepancy between what our country's production plans around fossil fuels and what is actually necessary to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. We're currently on track to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels by the end of this decade than what is consistent with 1.5 degree scenario. And here, this is research from Oil Change International, which does a lot of work around fossil fuel supply and just transitions. This shows that already the current reserves of coal, oil, and gas overshoot our 1.5 degree carbon budget and make it entirely clear that there can be no new fossil fuel expansion anywhere if we want to have a chance to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And even the International Energy Agency, which is a ruling energy body, but also conservative in some of its projections, said in their net zero report last year that there can be no new investment in fossil fuel supply in our net zero pathway. And the most recent IPCC report, in the words of the UN Secretary General, should sound a death knell for coal and fossil fuels before they destroy our planet. So I think these are quite clear from major climate science bodies and major energy bodies that there is no space for fossil fuels if we're to overcome the climate emergency. And we have the Paris Agreement, which is a really important piece of climate legislation, but there is a huge elephant in the room in that there's no mention of coal, oil, and gas once in the Paris Agreement. And only now in COP26 in Glasgow was there the first mention of coal, but a very watered down version of this, and showing that there needs to be a complementary mechanism that focuses on a fair phase out of fossil fuels based on historical contribution to the climate crisis, economic diversification, economic capacity, etc. And here's a different way of visualizing it. This is from research from some of our partners also on the steering committee. And it shows basically what is the percentage of countries' economies that come from oil on the x-axis, and on the y-axis it shows the GDPs of different countries. So we can see Canada is in the top left, basically, alongside UK, the US, and Norway that have these really high GDPs. And actually, contrary to all the propaganda and kind of media pieces that we hear is not so dependent on oil for its national economy. Whereas we see countries in the bottom right, like Iraq or Congo or Angola, Nigeria, countries that range between almost 40% and 90% of their public revenue is coming from oil. So the transition off of fossil fuels needs to happen first and fastest from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from Norway, these countries that have this huge historical and present day contribution to climate emergency actually have the financial capacity to wean off of, oil and other fossil fuels and support other countries in the transition that don't have diversified economies or as high GDPs to be able to do it right away. So obviously this kind of complexity requires international cooperation. And this is just an example, because you can also look at shares of employment that comes from different fossil fuel sectors and ensuring that workers have just transitions. So how does the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty fit into all of this? As I said, we're a global campaign for fossil fuel phase out and a just energy transition. And the three pillars that ground the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty take inspiration from a lot of treaties that came before. Treaties to ban landmines and nuclear weapons and substances that deplete the ozone layer, etc. So the three pillars of the Fossil Fuel Treaty are, first, it's non-proliferation, that there is no new expansion or exploration into new reserves of coal, oil, and gas anywhere in the world. That the second pillar is a fair phase out. So thinking about some of the ideas I shared in the last slide about how much countries depend on oil use, or oil or coal or gas, just as an example, an equitable phase out of the existing reserves that are in production of fossil fuels, having the wealthier countries lead this transition first and support countries in the global south that are more dependent on fossil fuels in this phase out of fossil fuel production. And the third is a just energy transition, that we can actually expand renewable energy access for all people, have economic diversification, and a just transition for current workers that are employed in the fossil fuel sector. And here are basically a lot of the objectives that we have as part of the Fossil Fuel Treaty campaign. We know that there's amazing campaigns all around the world right now to stop extraction projects, to end financing for fossil fuels. Our idea is to kind of complement these really important struggles that are going on, and having, there can be the struggle of you're working so hard to stop a specific pipeline, and then 3 other ones are proposed once you stop the one you wanted to stop, or you're trying to close a gas terminal, etc. So we're trying to say this blanket, no more expansion. We're taking it a different direction, which is one that's grounded in renewable energy. And cities are a really important part of this campaign, and I'm going to touch on that in the next slides. But I just wanted you to see kind of an overarching scale our objectives. As the treaty campaign, we know there's been so much focus in mainstream climate work to reduce emissions and reduce demand for fossil fuels, but very limited focus on actually addressing the supply and the production of fossil fuels. That's led us to these massive overshoots where we're nowhere close to meeting our climate targets, and really jeopardizes the potential to have a safe climate. So we are calling for this coordinated and managed decline of fossil fuel production and a just transition to clean energy. We are a directed network, so we have more than 1,300 groups around the world that have already endorsed the 3 pillars of the treaty, and we invite your organizations to do so as well if you haven't already. And we're really working to expand the voices that are campaigning and demanding a fossil fuel treaty. So we've had 101 Nobel laureates, including the Dalai Lama, call for the 3 pillars of the treaty last year. There's also been around 3,000 academic, scientists and researchers that have endorsed the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And here you can see, in the words of Michael Mann, it's time to bring an end to the age of fossil fuels. We've also had youth activists launch a call for the fossil fuel treaty, declaring coal, oil, and gas as their generation's weapons of mass destruction. And actually tomorrow, the global climate strikes, and the fossil fuel treaty is one of the main demands for the digital campaign of Fridays for Future. And we've had a parliamentarians call for a fossil fuel-free future that was initiated by 20 members of parliament in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Pacific. And now there's over 170 signatories from around 25 countries around the world. So also, if there's any MPs on the call, feel free to add your name to this list. This is the original initiators, around 20 of them who started this call. And now I'll focus on cities, which is why you're here. And There's a big part of it started in Canada, as Vancouver was the first city in the world to endorse the fossil fuel treaty last year, or in 2020, now that we're in 2022. And LA was the first city in the US, Barcelona was the first European city, and Dhulikhel in Nepal was the first city in the global south. We've had Sydney, a bunch of municipalities across Costa Rica, most recently Amsterdam, which is one of the largest energy ports in Europe, endorsed the fossil fuel treaty. We had Cambridge demand fossil fuel phase out in the lead up to COP26 in Glasgow. And Bisma mentioned this at the beginning, but we're super excited because Paris just announced yesterday its endorsement of the fossil fuel treaty. We've had Birmingham in the past weeks and also Edinburgh. And we have campaigns going on in cities on every continent in the world. So we're excited that Ottawa is part of this campaign. And I want to share, I guess, why cities are so important to this campaign. It's where most of humanity lives. It's more than 4 billion people in the world. And this is set to reach 70% of the whole world will live in cities by 2050. So it's an integral part of an energy transition, needs to focus on cities. It's where 2/3 of global energy consumption takes place, and more than 70% of all emissions every year are released from cities. And they're also on the front line of the climate crisis. I'm sure you or people that you love have experienced flooding or wildfires that we're unfortunately seeing as more and more common. And so cities in response are really taking action to phase out fossil fuels from their cities. And I think, as was mentioned by Councillor Mike Layton before, is this historical lens that we also have of cities really taking an important stance for social change, as in the nuclear disarmament movement, where we saw cities declare themselves nuclear-free zones. So we see kind of the role of cities in this campaign as integral. Now there's more than 40 cities around the world that have already endorsed the call for a fossil fuel treaty. We have plenty of resources. I'm sure you're already in deep with many of these resources already, but we have a pitch to cities that kind of shows this role, the role of cities in calling for a treaty. There's draft resolutions, so you don't have to start from scratch. You can see examples from other cities that have passed successful motions, or we can just send you templates. There's a briefing document for city officials. If there's ones that you find are more reluctant to join this cause, you can share this with them. We have a support guide on influencing local governments, and we also have template letters for campaigners to send to their city councillors, and also city councillors to send to the mayor or higher government once an endorsement has passed. And we also have this Fossil Fuel Free Cities Toolkit, which is inspired by a lot of different campaigns that are happening around the world, because the most common question that we get once a city has endorsed is what next? And so this is, I mean, this would be a future step for Ottawa once we have this hopeful endorsement, but it's basically an actions that cities can take to phase out fossil fuels from their cities and also remove the social reputation of the fossil fuel industry. And this year we're organizing a workshop series on cities for a fossil fuel treaty, which is, each session is a deep dive into the different actions that you can take as part of the toolkit. So earlier this month, we had a session on banning fossil fuel advertising in your city, and we had speakers, campaigners from the Netherlands, where Amsterdam has already successfully banned fossil fuel advertising from its public metros, and it's inspired more campaigns. Now Greenpeace Europe is leading a campaign for an EU law to ban fossil fuel advertising at the continental level, so really showing how cities' campaigns can scale also to continental levels. And here's a bunch of resources that you can take. I think one I want to add is the fossilfueltree.org/cities, which I'll add to the chat. But we've recently revamped the page, and it has all of these resources available in one place and a map of the growing cities that have endorsed. So I'll leave it at that, and I will pass back to Bisma. But I think if anyone has questions, also feel free to ask me. And thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much for this very informative and enlightening presentation, Sebie. It really kind of helps all of us understand the true essence of the campaign and the developments being made, and certainly inspire us to be involved and do more. I just want to add here that being a member of this campaign and being with Ecology Ottawa and a member of the Ottawa Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty campaign, I'm super excited to be part of bringing this important campaign to Ottawa. Yeah, and now I would like to invite other campaign members to say a few words on why do they think it's important, and why are they part of this significant campaign, yeah, and to reflect on their inputs and any comments or suggestions they want to add. Yeah, so I'll start with Angela.
Thank you very much, Bisma. So I think I'm the executive director of cafes, and this campaign, it pushes on the city, but it also gives us so many tools to organize and inform. I think that there is a huge actual communication and knowledge gap when it comes to climate. We all know the first basics, but then after that, there's been, I think, a lot of powerful communications by the energy sector, the fossil fuel companies that are very organized. So this campaign allows us to organize back. So I'm so grateful for the international organizers, and this really is going to get traction in Ottawa. I promise you that.
Thank you, Angela. Right. Yeah, Susie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Susie, and I'm speaking on behalf of For Our Kids, the Ottawa Gatineau chapter. We're a group of more than 600 parents who are concerned about climate change and the speed at which human actions are causing the planet to warm. Our children are also worried. Unfortunately, a study showed that more than 75% of children as young as 5 years old, experience climate anxiety. Climate anxiety in children not only comes from the worry that they have little ability to affect change, but the fact that adults that do have power aren't making the changes needed to protect the future of this planet. As parents, we try to do everything we can to protect our children, but when it comes to climate change, we know that our own individual actions aren't enough. We need systemic changes. This is why having Ottawa endorse the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is so important. We as individuals, no matter how concerned and loud that we can be, will not influence the change that government policy without the support of our city. Our cities have the power to impact change at a level that will be significant to lower our emissions and slow down the rate of warming. By endorsing this motion, Ottawa will be showing other Canadian cities and all of our children how elected leaders are taking climate change seriously. The vote would demonstrate that Ottawa is in support of action at the municipal, provincial, and federal level to transition away from fossil fuels, which can embolden our MPs and MPPs to make a better and stronger policy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Susie, so much. Rolly from Below 2C, do you want to add anything, any comments?
Yes, very briefly, I'd just like to say how happy I am to be with this particular group of very passionate, very very knowledgeable people. I'm involved in quite a few actions and events around Ottawa. But what brings to light, for me anyway, is the importance of a fossil fuel treaty is what I see happening in Ukraine right now. A needless war financed by fossil fuel revenues in the hands of a tyrant. There's nothing more dangerous than that. So I am so happy that this movement is expanding globally, and here in Ottawa, we're working to have our city adopt a treaty, and so I'm very happy to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolly. Thank you, everyone, for your input and your valuable inputs and participation. Really appreciate it. And I feel that all of this conversation sort of consolidates our goal and reflects that why it is important for many Ottawans to see action on climate change at City Hall. All right, moving forward, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the city councillors who are present today. Thank you so much for your time and for your participation. It means a lot to us. And special thanks to Councillor McKenney, who is here with us today. And I would like to invite them to say a few words about the launch of this campaign here in Ottawa. What are their views? And if they want to reflect on what the city councillors can do to endorse the treaty. Councillor McKenney, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bisma. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you. Just so many strong thinkers. I know that I work with many of you, have for the last years. Recognize a lot of the people who are here. Just want to recognize also all my councillor colleagues. Sean Menard is here, and somebody from Kathy Curry, Councillor Curry's office. If I've missed anyone else, I'm sorry, you jumped on late. I looked earlier. And it was great to hear Councillor Layton from Toronto and how he moved that through Toronto City Council. You know, in 2019 and 2020, City of Ottawa declared two emergencies: a housing emergency, which is raging today, continues to rage today, and a climate emergency. And we've just not acted as if either of them are real emergencies. And while, you know, a housing emergency does take a tremendous amount of effort from other levels of government, a climate emergency really can be addressed, and can, you know, the challenge of it can be addressed at the city, at the municipal level. But we have to be imaginative. And as Angela Keller-Herzog often tells me, if I ask, you know, can we put this off? Delay is the new denial. And it is. Nobody's denying it anymore, but, you know, we always want to push things back. We always want to be careful. So we do. We have to take inspiration, you know, from other municipalities, their imagination, and you know, and show that, you know, we know cities like Ottawa are on the front lines of the climate emergency. We're feeling it. We get floods. We are, you know, we have heat islands, and you know, when I listen to Councillor Layton, when I look at, you know, other cities who have endorsed the treaty globally and here in Canada, you know, if Vancouver and Toronto can do it, then of course we can, and we should do it. And I often think, you know, because there was something Councillor Layton said that tweaked me about, you know, his suburban colleagues, and often we break down our kind of lines of alliance, you know, geographically in this city as well. But I cannot imagine that I am the only one with a teenager at home who worries that she's not going to have the same life that I did, that it's not going to be as easy for her and her, you know, her contemporaries. And and while she doesn't cry about a lot of things, she does sometimes break down, and, you know, thinking about what it means for her and for the people in her life. And I just can't imagine that doesn't happen in households across this city. We know it does. So we have to reach across those lines. And this is not a partisan issue. This is an existential issue, and it's an issue of equity. And we know that there are cheap, safe options at all levels of government to do our part. You know, to not add to, as Sebie pointed out, not add to, and then to phase out fossil fuels. And cities play a key role in the climate emergency. Things like bike lanes, things like denser neighborhoods, better standards for our buildings, truly affordable housing with an electrified fleet. But it costs money. And so while we've declared our climate emergency, we are hesitant to actually invest where we need to. but we have to, because we can invest now or we can invest more later. But we need to make those serious investments, and we have to be honest with people in terms of what it means. So I thank everybody here today. This is exciting. You know, that both the organizations, residents from the city. You know, I often note that I see new people all the time. Every time we talk about climate action at the city, I see more and more residents who are involved in that conversation. So thank you for this, pressing us to do more to address the climate emergency with bold solutions that help us again to phase out fossil fuels and ramp up on those renewable energy and just transition into renewable energy in an equitable way. Things again like free transit. I think people get around this city. We let people drive on roads for nothing, and we need to let people get onto transit. It's equitable, and it does more to reduce our GHGs than almost anything. So I look forward to working with you. You know, my colleagues, and I'm taking action on a non-proliferation treaty, a motion, and taking the actions on top of that, in addition to that, taking the actions that will actually make a difference in our city for us, for our kids, for their kids, and for everyone's future. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of everyone here today, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today on the launch of this very important campaign here in Ottawa, and your comments on how the city councils can play an effective role in not only endorsing this treaty. I think it's certainly very helpful and inspiring for others who are advocating for this campaign. All the members of this group were thankful for you to be speaking on the city council's behalf, and we are really hopeful that we want to collaborate. And I hope we are able to work together to make fast-tracking progress towards a sustainable, just, and fossil fuel transition in Ottawa. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right. Looks like we are coming close to the end of this event. Time flew by. Thank you everyone for your presence and participation today. Launch of this campaign, Ottawa's Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Campaign. It certainly is a very significant development in our fight against climate change. And as we know, there's no more pressing concern and priority than climate. And without any delay, we need bold and immediate action. And we urge everyone to help us keep this momentum building. We have our petition up on our webpage. We urge all of you to formally endorse this treaty. Please sign the petition, share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. And please do, we encourage you to consider copying or we have a letter up there if you want to write your own letter to your councillor and sort of urging and encouraging them to champion Ottawa's endorsement of the treaty. It would be great, and we would really appreciate that. And I think it is the need of the hour as well. All right, do we have any questions? Or are we, any comments? No, all right.
Thank you everyone for coming. I have that comment. It's been a great turnout and really exciting to see so many people interested in getting this going.
Yes, thank you all. We look forward to working with you all on the next steps for endorsing the treaty here in Ottawa. Thank you so much, Councillor McKenney, Councillor Menard, and the staffers of Councillor Egai and Curry for joining us, as well as all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, someone is asking for the slides. We will get back to you. Are you talking about the presentation from Sebie? I think so.
Can share the presentation. Liz has it
Yeah.
already, actually.
All right, we'll share the presentation with all the participants.
Oh, yes, I do. We can send that to you after. Yeah, great.
What is-
Very
what is-
quickly, Bismarck, what are the immediate next steps for people to know?
So we want this petition to be signed by as many Ottawans as possible, and this is just a start. But of course, we are focusing at this point that we want to encourage people to reach out to the councillors and ask them and encourage them to sign the petition and mainly, endorse this treaty.
We welcome your thoughts, Raleigh. What you think next steps would be helpful.
No, I think I just thought the participants, would want to know that. Yeah, and I know that the immediate steps, of course, would be to communicate with councillors. I've not, really given it much thought beyond that, but certainly keeping the fossil fuel treaty foremost in everybody's mind and through social media. And I'm not sure if the organizers, I've been on the periphery of the organizing. So I wasn't sure if there had been more, concrete steps going forward.
I think we'll follow up with councillors who were here, who are in the Environment Committee after we, with councillors McKenney and Menard, mostly in terms of seeing about possibilities through Environment Committee, perhaps in terms of next steps for the motion.
Yeah, and I would also like to suggest that we will reach out to all registrants and participants from to this meeting with some follow-up opportunities.
Absolutely.
And if they like to, give any inputs and suggestions, that would be appreciated. All right,
Great.
thank you so
Great
much,
point.
everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. Wonderful event, great reception, and great. I'm happy with how many people showed up, and special thanks to our guest speakers. And look forward to more opportunities like this. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.